Hey there. I've played a lot of games, but this game? Oh, this game knows what's going on. Now, I'll be honest with you, if that did not absolutely jazz you up, could be my poor editing skills, or maybe this game's not quite for you. But I'll tell you something. I love a game where I can go sneaking through vents, trying to avoid enemies, get to my objective, and then whip out a rifle and just go absolutely gun blazing on the way out. There's something about this game that really just gives you a very visceral feel as you're going through the combat. The guns feel weighty, the impacts feel very good. And now, I am playing on the true difficulty mode, and that may affect things quite a bit. However, the game seems to just genuinely or really care about the way that it feels as you're fighting people. And now, before we go too much further, I do want to go ahead and throw out a spoiler warning. Obviously, we're going to talk about this game pretty in depth. If you care heavily about the story or about the way that the levels are laid out or possible guns to unlock or anything like that, it's probably best that you stop here. I'll put a timestamp in here for you to be able to skip to, where we get away from talking about the story, talking about the levels, and more so just discussing the overall gameplay aspect. That being said, there's going to be background videos going on for the most part, so just do your best to avoid watching those or paying attention to those if you do genuinely care about the spoilers. However, this game's not a extremely story-heavy game. There is one. It's vaguely interesting, but definitely not the highlight of the game. Now, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of love and care put into particularly the level design and the way that you can interact with the level, be it through gadgets, be it through the ability to throw your magazine at a light switch to turn the lights off on the guards, ways to sneak past and navigate around various areas, or even ways that you can go in an all-out assault and be able to find appropriate cover and escape routes to be able to move and really take advantage of the fact that the NPCs are going to utilize their AI to try and push you and group up. It lets you set traps. It really just flows together extremely well. They did a great job with the level design. They did a great job with the gadget design and the ways that those can all interact with the world. Now, all that being said, there are a few issues with the game. You know, not everything is perfect with it, but that is to be expected from a smaller studio. There are some control scheme issues. Some things can feel a little wonky, especially when you're in a very intense situation, and the enemy AI can feel a little overtuned, but we'll talk about that a little bit more as we address those individual items. So let's talk about enemy AI a little bit. Now, enemy AI kind of makes or breaks a game of this type. Having really poor enemy AI makes the game feel cheap, it makes it easy, but having things a little overtuned feels unfair. And I do think that the game strikes a very strong balance with it all, additionally taking a lot of care to try and make the enemies react as a human would in a situation. A real great example of this is the clip on the screen here, showing that shooting a round near an enemy does make them panic. They kind of stop a little bit, and then there are times that they even will sit outside of a door and build up a group and hold that one entryway, rather than try and push in and just get killed by you. Additionally, they do call in on their radio whenever they're running into weird situations, if they see a light interacting weird, and you can actually kill them before this happens, and it will alert the other enemies because the person stopped talking. However, they don't know exactly where they're at, and they don't all come rushing over immediately. So lots of these little interactions that can put you in really tough situations. You know, a lot of these types of games, they can at times let you just hold doorways and clear an entire enemy group out of a area. Additionally, just using certain tactics or sitting in certain areas, you're able to just kill people as they walk by. This game really does a good job of addressing that and making sure that those sorts of things are not possible. You can definitely still cheese the game a little bit, but for the most part, it's still a rather difficult challenge as you move through things. Depending on the method that you want to go in on a level, whether that be just going in and assaulting things or going in a very stealth manner, or even a hybrid of the two, you can really find a lot of challenge in the way that you try and navigate the enemy patterns and the ways that they're guarding areas and interacting with each other. I've absolutely had levels where I have repeated the level 40 to 50 times because I just can't get over a certain pattern that the enemy guards are walking, and I've had to resort to using different gadgets that I never would normally. Using empty magazines to throw them and distract enemies, using the EMP launcher to turn off and on lights. Throwing knives were a absolute favorite of mine. There's a lot of cool interactions that you can really make use of, and they really challenge you with the enemy AI. And now there are some cons to the enemy AI for sure. There are lots of moments where they feel a little overtuned, a little overly sensitive to certain interactions and certain things that occur. Sometimes they can be placed in rather unforgiving areas, and that may be just trying to keep true to what it would feel like in a, I'll say, realistic scenario to be navigating through the things that your character is. But holding certain angles that just make it incredibly difficult to move past them, hearing a body fall from the inside of a house, things of that sort can definitely feel a little unfair at times. But again, playing on the difficulty that I am, your experience may vary pretty heavily on those lower difficulties, and there's never been a time that I've been so frustrated I've wanted to quit. And moving on from the enemies, the AI that's involved in that, let's talk about the weapon unlocks. Let's talk about the gadgets a little bit. Pretty critical part of a tactical shooter, especially a stealth-based tactical shooter, is going to be your customization and your unlocks that you're able to obtain. A pretty big part about the game is that you need to be vulnerable, you need to die rather quickly if you're being shot at, and it needs to be punishing, and so it can be kind of hard to find ways to make your character scale up and feel more powerful. Without necessarily giving you just extra health or extra protection per se. And that's where these customizations come in, giving you some different platforms to use as weapons and being able to customize those weapons and give you stat buffs to a degree without necessarily making the game feel unrealistic. Now, there's quite a few different weapon types that are available, going from rifles to SMGs to shotguns to carbines to pistols, and each one feels pretty distinctive from the previous. You know, your SMGs and your assault rifles in a lot of games can feel pretty similar, but they do a pretty good job of really differentiating the two here in this game. And then beyond that, you do have quite a few different weapons available in each category, and each of them having their own accuracy, their own noise levels, and a lot of things to consider as you move through and choose them. And not only that, there's a lot of customization options for each weapon as well. You can add sights, you can change stocks, you can change your ammo type, triggers, magazines. There's a lot of different stuff that's available, and that changes depending on the class of weapon that you choose. But plenty of stuff to make the game feel fresh, being able to customize weapons as you go through, and really getting new unlocks can be an exciting thing that really makes doing levels and going through and exploring feel pretty rewarding. Now, the other big part of the game are gadgets, and now there's nothing too crazy here for the most part. It's your standard fare that you would expect to see in most tactical shooters or stealth games. You've got throwing knives, EMP grenades, frag grenades, health kits, and now what you do bring does change the way that you're probably going to move through a level. If you have grenades and health kits, you might be going in just shooting everything you see, whereas if you have a throwing knife and EMP blaster, maybe you're going a little bit more of a stealth route. Now, the nice part about this game that is something I don't see often is you do get to choose your armor type, grabbing heavier armor for more protection, but it makes you more loud, it makes you slower, or your lighter armor to be able to move a little bit more quietly, but not be able to take as many shots. Now, there's a lot of cool interaction with the world that can come from these gadgets, and that will again change the way that you play a level. But in my opinion, you're seeing most gadgets that you would expect to see in most infantry-based shooters. You're missing out on some of the ones like drones and things like that that some of those newer games may incorporate. Now, transitioning from just talking about your character and your equipment and looking at the game kind of from a holistic standpoint here, the story of the game is okay. There's nothing super crazy to write home about per se. It's interesting enough to keep you focused on the game and capture your attention a little bit, but it's definitely not got any crazy turns you're not going to be expecting or anything of that form, in my opinion. It was just enough to be serviceable and to get me to continue playing, but it was the gameplay that really kept me there versus the story. Now, the level sets and the design of everything as you're moving through is phenomenal, in my opinion. I think the building layouts are all sensible. There's a lot of interesting areas that you can duck into. You can go through vents to escape areas. You can get key cards to gain access to certain rooms, and there's lots of nice little features scattered throughout the level that you can take advantage of. There's camera systems that you can gain access to and use to scout ahead. There may be dumpsters that you're able to get trash out of to throw and make distractions. useful rooms that you can hide bodies in that people are not going to go into, or even closets you can duck into if the guards are patrolling your area and you need to hide rather quickly. They also make great use of window space and things like that to be able to give the guards active areas to see you when you're taking alternative routes that may not necessarily be useful for you per se, but they are necessary in keeping you contained and controlling the flow of the level. And that's an important part of the design here, in my opinion, in that the scenarios and the levels that you're placed into, they don't seem to be heavily set-pieced out. They seem to be more grounded in a scenario that you may actually encounter in real life if you were a dangerous bounty hunter. But they are less grandiose. They're not really crashing lighthouses down or creating distractions by blowing things up, but rather just being able to move around an alternative means through buildings. Now, as you're completing levels, typically your goal is just going to be towards a certain point of the map. You need to go find a person or do something. As you're moving towards that goal, typically you have a moral choice at the end, and that's where the story tends to possibly branch a little bit. There are multiple endings, and the characters that you play as and interact with will have different dialogue options, different things that come up depending on the choices that you make. Now, for the sake of not spoiling the game entirely, I'm not going to talk too heavily about that, but it is important to keep in mind that there are branching dialogue choices, there's ways that you can make some different choices, and the morals of your character actually do come into play. Now, all that being said, I had a ton of fun with the game. I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. It's a smaller studio, and so understandably everything could use an extra little bit of refinement, maybe a little bit of extra polish on top of everything. But overall, for the price point of $20 on Steam that it's normally at, it's a great experience. It's a great one to pick up. There's a lot of fun. It's got Steam Workshop support, and so really it's just something you could go back through and replay pretty often. I appreciate you taking the time to listen and watch, especially if you made it to the end here. I'm still trying to figure out all this YouTube stuff, so if you ever have any recommendations or anything like that, feel free to drop a comment down there so that I can try and improve myself. But I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a great one.